Yeah, now when you all got married, did he know about the occult background?
It was a source of shame for me for a while. I really didn't even want to talk about it for a while. And I will say that there are things that have happened within the last several years that not only made me realize I've got to talk about it, but I'm going to be extremely loud about it because these things are not acceptable. They're not acceptable. And I feel like I really wish that we had been taught about spiritual warfare when I was in the church, like when I was growing up, because I never knew anything about that. It blip on the radar. Nobody paid attention to it. And the older I get, the more I try to walk that walk and carry my cross and follow our Lord, the more I realize that there are generations of people that have just been, I would say, I want to use the word duped, and I was trying to think that might not be a good word, but that's exactly what it is. They've just been duped into believing that everything is just happy-go-lucky, hunky-dory, and there's no such thing as spiritual battle. So, yeah.
One ex-occultist said that when she started talking to priests, when she was leaving the occult and trying to convert, that the priests were just very dismissive of her background.
Yeah.
They'd be like, well, you're Catholic now. You don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah.
That's in the past. And
no.
Her perspective was like, that sounds very Protestant. Like,
it does.
I have reparation to make.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the biggest things that I had an issue with was coming to terms with, okay, first of all, I have to admit this to myself, and I know that God knows that I did this, but I have to own it. I have to own up to it, you know. I can't personally reach out to the people that I would make spells for. I can't personally reach out to people that, I would do channeling sessions for. But I can go to God and just on my face and just absolutely beg for forgiveness. And I pray for those people every single day. I mean, every single day. I pray for people that I have led astray, and I know that that's going to be something that I have to answer for in my final judgment, and I'm willing to do it. But it was, I think, and I got pretty lucky with when I started to open up about it, because Father was really, really great in just listening. He was like, okay, well, let's talk about it.
That's good.
We'll go forward from here, and and that's how it works. But there's a lot of people that just dismiss it. They're like, well, it's not that big of a deal, but it is, because it's like you said, it doesn't leave you. It's literally like a scar. You're not going to get rid of it. It's there. You're going to see it. It's going to be present. I think one of the things that I liken it to, especially since we live close-ish, sort of, right, is that a lot of times they'll do timeshare presentations.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And what they'll do is they'll offer you all of these cool things. They're like, we're going to give you tickets to, medieval times, and you can go out to eat at the buffet, and you can have all of these great free things that are amazing, that are going to make your experience so much better. All you have to do is sit through this timeshare presentation. Okay, fine. Most people are not going to actually sign up for the timeshare. Then you've got silly, stupid people that think it's a great idea, and they get caught up in, all the things that I'm going to get, like myself, that you sign up for the timeshare, and then when you realize you got a bum rap, like it's a bad deal, and you try to get out of it, you may get out of it, but they still have your phone number, they still have your email address, they still have your address, they know where you live, and they are not, and when it's time for them to turn over some numbers, you're the first call. And that's, I realize that that's really allegorical, but that's how I see it, because they're never going to lose your number. They're always going to hit you at home, and they're going to hit you when everything is perfect, everything is great. That's when stuff's going to happen.
To remind you.
Yeah, it's like, hey, by the way, we know that you signed with the other team after you promised that you were going to play for us. And so there's animosity there. So it's almost worse than if somebody knows better and they still do it, it's absolutely 100% worse. Because you know better. And they know you know better. They also think you're an idiot. I mean, that's just how it is. They're not giving you things. They're mocking you. So.
Yeah. You're reminding me of a lot of things that I've been learning. Mm-hmm. The experience of occultists and ex-occultists, I guess, is very uniform. Mm-hmm. Everybody's saying the same thing, which is why it's important that people know what's going on, because this is a reality. This is not just random experiences, but there's a system, like you said. Even though the occult is not organized like the church in a way, it is. It's just chaotically organized.
Exactly.
Now, when you met your first husband, he was in the Church of Satan, Anton LaVey's system. How did you not know that?
And I've talked to therapists and all kinds of stuff about this, but it was because he didn't tell me. He didn't let me know. Okay. That was something that he held really close to the vest.
Kind of lured you in
until after we were married, and then I want to say not even 2 weeks after we got married, all of everything hit the fan. That's when the abuse started. That's when I started to notice that there's some really weird things going on here with this guy. But I made that bed. I was going to lie in it, and that was one of those things that I really should have paid more attention to. But I was young and rebellious, and it was one of those things like, I know exactly what to say to this girl, when to say it, how to say it, and it was just like a fish on a hook. So,
and your catechesis was not good.
No.
So you didn't have the radars up looking.
No,
for
I didn't, and I think there is nothing good about being in the occult. I mean, absolutely 100% unequivocally, nothing good. The one takeaway that I have, and I'm sure when you've talked to other people that used to practice the occult, they will tell you the same thing, is that radar is kind of dialed up really, really high now.
Yeah, right.
So now it's like if you think about things that you used to be involved in or people that you used to know and you're like, there was something a little off about that person, it's just really dialed up. Yeah. And it's an unfortunate side effect, I guess.
Yeah, one person who was the New Ager, who eventually realized he was real close to the occult, he didn't know it. He said, like everybody was saying that, that they see the occult everywhere in the culture now.
Yes.
And I think that uniform statement, consistent statement from everybody is a red flag for the church.
Yes.
Why are these people who went into the occult saying they see the occult everywhere in the culture? We need to let them speak, which is one reason I think I've been inspired to talk to you all and get this perspective. Because like parents need to know. I'm talking to a lot of families now who've been impacted by the occult, and some who have not been impacted but have seen it as they raise their kids. And they're sharing their experiences. But so many people are not aware, don't have the radars for the church, aren't catechized, and a lot of kids are falling into it as a result. Because like you said, like your experience, you didn't know to look for it, you didn't know to care, and then you end up marrying a Satanist. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a crazy example.
It really is, but
it happened. It's real.
And it's true, and it's like my husband, he didn't used to pay attention to that stuff. He didn't used to care about that stuff. And it actually took me like a year or two to kind of come clean about that. Even after we were, going to church and everything. And I was like, look, so here's the deal. We need to talk about this. And I really should have talked to you about this earlier, but here it is. And he said that actually makes a lot of sense, because I've gotten to be more and more vocal about, things that we used to watch on TV. I was like, we're not watching that. Sorry. Music that people used to listen to, I was like, nope, not in my house. Yeah. Sorry, you have to turn it off. And it's like, why? It's like, because that's the occult. That's, and if you watch it, it can still influence you. You can be like, oh, it's not a big deal. We're just watching a movie. No, it's in your home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what would you say? And I've been seeing it more and more now that I've spoken with people. Now I see the occult everywhere.
Yeah.
I've been shown where it is and how to look for it. What impact would you say occultic imagery, music, themes in movies, symbols and signs everywhere will have on even, so your run-of-the-mill person and even your devout Catholic who's in the world?
Yeah.
What impact will all of that have, even if just on their psychology or even tempting them in a special way?
Well, the imagery, the symbols, the movies and things like that, the way that they can impact you is it kind of, first of all, what it does is it kind of desensitizes to start with. If you're used to seeing it, then it's not that big of a deal if it's out there more. Or if it's in your house, like people, case in point. And I'm guilty of when this show first came out, before, coming back to the church, that we used to watch it. There's a show called Supernatural, okay? Which is about these two brothers that they hunt demons and all kinds of stuff, right? Okay, kind of a cool premise. Could always use more, get rid of demons. That's great.
That's right.
But they have different symbols that they use. And when that fandom grows, then you see people with these symbols tattooed on them.
That's right.
You see people, then they had like exorcisms, quote unquote, in there.
In the movie, in the show?
In the show that these lay people were doing. And then you had people that were, and okay, it's Latin, but who knows what they're saying? I mean, unless you're fluent in Latin, which I admit I'm not.
That's right.
So these people are using it as a ringtone. The more that and that's just one example. Like you've got shows that, Sabrina the Teenage Witch or whatever, that's blatantly satanic. But it's on Netflix and people are just eating it up season after season after season. The obvious one, the show Lucifer, where he helps solve murders.
Strange.
It's because it's desensitization. And when you're desensitized to it, you're like, oh, okay, it's almost like if somebody's just sitting here poking you with a needle. Mm-hmm. First couple of times you're like, okay, that's not comfortable. But after a while, it just goes numb and you don't feel it anymore.
Yeah.
And by then the damage is done.
Yeah, and I can't remember where it was. I may have posted it on Twitter. The whole Pachamama thing.
Oh, goodness.
The world gets so
We're getting into that.
That's right. It gets so desensitized to the occult.
Yeah.
That most people, we're kind of in the same Catholic Twitter realm where everybody did sound the alarm. But if you get outside of that, it's just like, it didn't even happen.
Exactly. Like, or the idea that, I'm going to sound so insensitive when I say this, and I'm not going to apologize for it. When people talk about, cultural differences, like, that idol, it was just, the cultural difference. It's supposed to be, quote unquote, Our Lady of the Amazon. When no, there's actually an Our Lady of the Amazon. That's the Blessed Mother in her beautiful state. Not this, whatever this is. And when that happened, like you said, there were a lot of people that sounded the alarm. Like myself, there's another, I'll give you her information. I know you sounded the alarm. That's actually how we all kind of met and came together, was when this started happening. And there was different things that were going on, that it wasn't just that. It was the fact that they were doing sage smudging in chapels.
Oh, yeah.
With shamans. Like, in the castles of our Lord, you are doing this absolutely horrible thing that you don't know what's in that sage. That drives me nuts when people are like, I'm going to smudge sage so that I can get rid of evil spirits. No, you're not. You're actually inviting them in because you don't know how that was put together. Because it's not just a bundle of sage. No, there are spells that go into it. And people don't realize that. So they'll just buy them and do it. And they're just like, well, demons sound fun. No, it's not it. But they were smudging sage in there, and they were doing, there was one video where there were a bunch of people that were going around in a circle, but they were going around counterclockwise. and there was a bishop in there with them, just sitting there doing this essentially, the term is called widdershins, but they were doing this, and my friend Tasha and I were just like, this is a thing, they're doing this, anything that goes counter to the natural order.
The inversion.
The inversion. So it was going counter to the natural order. And then I think the one thing that a lot of people don't talk about, which I honestly feel, this happened, and then we had all this other stuff happen that just really opened up Pandora's box. Please forgive that expression, was the pact in the catacombs. People don't talk about the pact in the catacombs, how you have a bunch of successors of the apostles in an underground catacomb that are signing a document with their thumbprint in a red liquid.
When was that? I remember
it was during the synod, and I know Dr. Anthony Stein actually has a video on it.
Synod on the Amazon.
Yeah, because it was, and if you are it doesn't matter. And people were like, oh, it's probably not blood. It doesn't matter. If you are mimicking that, if you have a red liquid because you're like, oh, well, we can use cherry juice instead of blood, and you're signing something with your biological marker, that is a blood pact, which is way beyond just regular paganism and occultist practice. That's borderline satanic. And when that happened, it would just like, I could feel my hair standing on end. And I think that was the point where I was like, all right, I'm just going to be loud about it. I'm just going to be loud about it. And if I see it, I'm going to call it out. So I've had a lot of people get mad at me about calling out centering prayer. And I've had a lot of people get mad at me about calling out yoga, especially when you practice yoga on church grounds. That's just a slap in the face to our triune God. There's just a lot of different things that, or the fact that there was a church in Germany that took out the altar and replaced it with a mound of dirt. That is Earth Magic 101. I mean, that's just primer stuff, which is disturbing, and people don't see it. They're like, oh, this is great. No, it's not.
Yeah, or just like, and that's it. Just, that's
like,
strange. And then
that's kind of crazy, but okay.
But to most people don't realize that it's moral. Like everything has a moral, spiritual weight to it. And there's a counter-revolution. So the church essentially is the revolution, God's revolution in the world. And then the occult is the counter-revolution. And it's not only here, it's going strong. And I think that's one of the things that people are completely oblivious to.
Exactly.
But if you grab all these details, like this listing you're giving now is important, because if you eventually, it's like making a court case.
Yeah.
Bringing forth all the evidence. Eventually, people who just dismissed it are like, wait a second. Kind of like with Taylor Marshall's infiltration book.
Yes.
When you put it all together, you're like, wait a second.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. It makes absolute perfect sense. And I think, when Father was here earlier, and we touched on it, and I know Taylor Marshall touched on it, the fact that, Bella Dodd was an atheist communist, and she was in charge of recruiting young men to seminaries. And she said over 1,100. She recruited over 1,100 atheist communists.
Successfully into the seminary.
Successfully into seminaries. And they went out to parishes. And
some of them were bishops.
And some of them were bishops and cardinals. And now here we are, post-Vatican II, we've had clown masses and liturgical dance and communion in the hand, and it just it's Timothy Gordon constantly says it's like boiling a frog. It was just like the slow boil.
Yeah.
And now you're at a point where there are people that are just like, this is comfortable, I'm perfectly happy. And it's not. Then you have people that have jumped out and they're like, nope, that's boiling and we need to fix it.
Yeah, it's like former smokers.
Yeah.
I made this analogy to somebody. I smoked when I was in late high school, early college, and then quit. I think it was like 3 years, thanks be to God.
Yeah.
But once I quit, the smell of tobacco smoke on someone is just repulsive.
It is.
And I have this like huge radar for it. I can smell it a mile away.
Exactly.
But before I smoked, and when I was smoking, I didn't have that idea. It was only after I quit. Same thing with the ex-occultists.
Yeah. And it's but former drinkers sometimes, like people that used to be really heavy drinkers, and they've gone through AA and they're not drinking anymore. A lot of times they'll tell you, I can smell it if somebody's been drinking. And they don't even have to breathe on me. I can smell it, which is kind of crazy, but it's true. So it's in that same vein. You recognize it. It's there. And you can tell somebody, like, hey, this is what's going on. They're like, I don't smell anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you aren't open to realizing that it's there doesn't mean it's not.
And I think we're at a point now, because of the 60s and everything since then, where we do have, as another ex-occultist said, the church now has the evangelical burden of reaching out to occultists and ex-occultists, to helping these people who've left the occult. Instead of the drug addicts, alcoholics, or former smokers, you have to reach out to them, so it's different. But now you have people exiting a new disease, which is the occult. And that's not yet on the radar.
It's not, and I think one of the reasons that it's not on the radar is probably one of the reasons why there's such a push to, I don't want to say suppress, but I feel like it's going to happen. Please, Lord, let it not. But I feel like it's going to, the push to suppress the traditional Latin Mass. Because 100% full stop, had I been raised with a traditional Latin Mass, I promise you I would not have been in the occult. There would have been no room for it. Yeah,
so on that I'm glad you brought that up, because I've been hearing from ex-occultists that they're all gravitating towards the traditional Latin Mass.
Yeah.
Did you? I think you do. And why? How would you connect what the TLM offers to what occultists were looking for?
Yeah, okay, so this is interesting, because when I came back to the church, I didn't start at the TLM, although the first time, like I said, when I went back to Mass, it was celebrated ad orientem. There was incense, there was, the Latin responses, we did the Sanctus and the Agnus Dei.
Is that the unicorn Mass?
It was a unicorn Mass, that's exactly what it was, and I was like, a little bit out of my element, but I really love this, because I firmly believe, and when you talk to former occultists, I'm sure a lot of them will tell you that they have ritual. They have ritual, and they have structure, and they have altars, and they have they have this almost regimented kind of system for their quote unquote free religion, but it's very regimented. And going from, and I don't want to say that it's that need that is ingrained in every human being for order, but I think a lot of it is that. But also the fact that it is the same, and it's not geared towards the people. It is worship, all worship, nonstop. You're not constantly having to I think one of the greatest things about COVID was when they got rid of the sign of peace in the Novus Ordo. It's like, thank you. Because it was just a distraction, and you have all of those distractions. So going from this pagan practice where you have all of that self-imposed ritual, but you have all that ritual, if you went to the Novus Ordo, and let's say you weren't able to get to a unicorn Mass, you got to this Mass where it was just like, and I'm not discounting or discrediting, the Novus Ordo, but there are more problems with it than I think people want to acknowledge and recognize. But you go from that to the Novus Ordo, and you're like, I'm going to go back to my structure. And then you see the TLM, and you realize that there is something happening here. There's something happening here that I never realized. And it's incredibly powerful. And I think the first time I went to a Latin Mass, that's what hit me the most. It's like the fact that, first of all, it's irreverent. I mean, it's extremely reverent, and the people are not the focus. It's our Lord is the focus. But it's timeless. It's timeless in a way that a lot of people in the occult were kind of looking for. They wanted to be a part of something
Ancient,
old
mysterious.
and ancient and mysterious, and I know that that's kind of what I loved. I was just like, yay, well, your God may be this, but mine is this one, and I don't like to say the names of the gods or the quote unquote deities, because I think they're all demonic now, but it just that transition, and also the knowledge, like I said, that if I had been exposed to that, if I had been exposed to this never would have happened. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if getting rid of the TLM it's just going to, it's almost like a floodgate, I think, because there's already so much of it.
And then you have some areas of the world, Chicago, that are suppressing it and also allowing total desecratory liturgical practices.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the beast that we're dealing with.
Exactly. Like I saw a video on Twitter. It's like Father Flager. Mm-hmm. I guess he was super popular during the Obama administration, but he just was up there during consecration, didn't even say the words properly. Mm-hmm. So it's not Jesus, but then he's walking around hugging people while he's supposed to be in the middle of the consecration. That's demonic. I mean, it's absolutely demonic, and I just think there's nothing that people love more than demons love more than just,
Yeah, so we could go down a very dark reflection, which is probably not speculation. Like what we're looking at is an age of the world where the occult is rising, mm-hmm. and the church, or members of the church, mm-hmm. are trying to destroy the tradition. Not just, I mean, if you look at, so after Vatican II, they quote unquote reformed the liturgy, mm-hmm. Quote unquote abrogated the traditional mass, and then Benedict's like, no, it's still legitimate. It comes back and flourishes. Yeah. And to go back again and mm-hmm. try to squish it again mm-hmm. is malicious. It is.
It's malicious and it's evil. And I think that I look at, I think if you look at because they haven't come out and said, all right, Byzantine Rite, you got to take it down a notch. They haven't done that. Yeah. Maronite Rite, you got to take it down a notch. Nothing, they've not said anything else. And these are very old, mm-hmm. more traditional rites. Not a peep. But the focus is lasered in on the TLM because first of all, it's encouraging reverent worship, but also, and I know Taylor Marshall said something about this, and this is one of my favorite things when I was teaching to tell the kids. I would talk about the anointed languages, how you've got Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, mm-hmm. but that Latin, that's the language that exorcists, very effective exorcisms are in Latin,
mm-hmm. By God's providence.
Yeah.
The church settled into the Latin language.
And it was like, okay, this is what works. This is where we go. And the idea, I honestly think that the shift is trying to just destroy the church. And I know you said taking that darker turn, but I think we've already taken, I honestly feel like they're trying to destroy the church and, not mm-hmm. saying names or saying that I'm not, yeah. But there are certain prelates higher up that are just, I honestly believe, are just trying to destroy it or remake it in their own image, mm-hmm. not God's own image, and it's an issue because it's just gonna open the door for more people to practice the occult. Right.
Yeah. Because I think I posted this on Twitter a little while ago that starting to see the traditional Latin Mass as the antidote mm-hmm. to the both. So both the antidote for those who have gone into it mm-hmm. and I don't know what you would call it, but if it's given to the kids immediately.
Yeah, it's almost like a preventative.
It's a preventative.
Yeah, because it's real. It's tangible and it's real, and it, if you ever had any kind of doubt about, the faith whatsoever, just go to one. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're confused about what to do, just sit down in the back.
Just watch.
Just sit down in the back and watch. You know, they give you that nifty little red missile that you can follow along with. It gives you little cues. It's fine. Just pray it while you're there. And it was life-changing when we started to go. I mean, when we started going, it just opened up a whole new world. Like it made us, we loved the fact that we were a Catholic household. You know, it wasn't just me and kids, you know, it was all of us. And it just worked really well. But going to the TLM, you take it with you, if that's what if that makes any sense. You don't just go, take your box, go home, eat wings and watch football, or, you know, whatever you're going to do. You take it with you. And so it influences the way that you live the rest of your day, the way that the rest of your week is going. It just kind of settles in and ingrains that, you know, that kind of jolt of Holy Spirit in you, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, it completely changed our household going there.
Yeah, I look forward to when my kids are older. And one of them is at the age of reason, and her attentiveness is different than the others. Because it's work. The TLM is work.
It is work.
When we go to the Novus Ordo, which is rare, on Sundays we go to the TLM. During the week, if we can make daily mass.
That's kind of what we do.
But whenever I have to go to, I call it the modern mass, the Novus Ordo, it's so different. It's almost shockingly different.
It really is, and you kind of, I was thinking about this earlier, that it's kind of like, it's almost like being bilingual.
Yeah.
I guess, you know, but
it's a different cultural expression.
It really is. And if with all the snow that we had, we came to mass on Sunday because we couldn't make it to the other one, and it was just like, there are little things that you kind of do. Like, I always kneel for the Agnus Dei, even if I'm in the Novus Ordo. I can't help it. I just do it. I have to stop myself from doing the responses in Latin, you know, the Et cum spiritu tuo and stuff. I have to stop myself because I'm like, okay, we're being a little bit bilingual here, so we got to work with this. But it does influence you as a person. It kind of changes the way that, I guess it just changes everything. So being able to say that I went from this absolute insanity over here to this wonderful, beautiful, like, foretaste of heaven is, I'm grateful for it every single day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've been going to the TLM on Sundays for about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And as an intellectual likes to research, read, and write, I notice on the intellectual level a huge difference going to the TLM versus the modern mass.
Yeah.
So when I'm at the Sunday Mass TLM, it's a lot of intellectual, not just work, but I'm being pulled in to a divine mystery.
Because you're paying attention. You're absolutely 100% paying attention, like you're invested.
And that's the key. At the modern Mass, I feel like a child. And I'm being patronized. And it's all like, you can't handle this, so let me deliver it. Let me spoon feed and break it down. Just, there's no meat. So they're taking away the meat, just gone back to the milk. Yeah. And I'm not a big fan.
There's a lot of substance, and that was, I thought it was interesting because we really wanted to start going to, because we would go here and there, you know, like, oh, okay, well, we can go to the Latin Mass. But then we really, really, I think it was after that whole Amazon Synod thing that it just really pulled us in. I mean, we were just 100% all about it. Yeah. And my husband, oddly enough, was the one that was like, we need some Latin. We need the Latin. Yeah. We need it. So that's when we really started getting serious about going. And
have a look back.
Don't regret it, but it really is, like you said, it's kind of like the antidote for. It's the antidote for former occultists. Because I've met 2 other ones at the TLM.
Oh.
Yeah, and they were like, yeah, we used to do this, and
Oh, wow.
now here we are because, it's the truth. And I think that's another thing, that when you've lived in the dark for so long, when somebody flicks on that light, you're immediately drawn to it, and you're like, okay, this is where we are now. And anytime you see somebody trying to shut the light off, you're like, nope, gotta leave the light on. And that for me is what that's like. It's like being one way for so long, just in that absolute darkness, even though you don't realize it at the time. You're like, okay, I'm in this darkness. And then once you realize it, that light means everything to you.
Right.
So
whereas a lot of people take it for granted.
Yeah, exactly.